Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going beyond basic film criticism to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm your host, Nicole, and with me today is...
Justin.
Marietta.
So Marietta is our special guest today. Marietta, can you give us a little background on you?
I'm a FOIA officer with the BIA. I'm a member of the Rosebud Sioux tribe. I am retiring in 2 months. I've worked for the government for 35 years, and I'm ready to start making ribbon skirts and star quilts.
That's amazing. And BIA stands for?
The Bureau of Indian Affairs.
Gotcha. Which we are overanalyzing this week is Killers of the Flower Moon. When oil is discovered in 1920s Oklahoma under Osage Nation land, the Osage people are murdered one by one until the FBI steps in to unravel the mystery. Directed by Martin Scorsese and starring a lot of white people. Starring Leonardo DiCaprio. All right. Justin, you're up first. What did you think?
I really enjoyed the movie, but my first thought immediately when I left the theater was Martin Scorsese could use an editor. Not that the movie was bad, it just felt extremely long. Like I needed an intermission or something. But the further I got from the movie, the more I could analyze it on its own merits, and I actually really enjoyed it.
Okay, Marietta, what did you think?
For me, it started off a little slow, and it was hard for me because I had to remember that it was a theatrical thing because I read the book and then I listened to it on Audible probably 3 times. So I know the book inside and out.
Okay. So did you know this historical event even before the book?
No. I was not aware of the murders, but I was not surprised that it happened.
Sure.
That is the way natives were. We were actually considered subhuman back in those days.
Right. Yeah, so no surprises here. I hated this movie. I would have left. 3.5 hours is way too long. I just didn't like it. I'm going to lay my bias up front. I don't like Martin Scorsese, and one of the 2 reasons I don't like Martin Scorsese is because he kind of focuses all his stuff on men, and that gets tiring after a while. I don't always need to hear male stories. But like number 2, he has made almost an entire career off of other people's suffering. And I feel like if you're going to make your money that way, you should maybe consider like giving back to those people's stories and lives that you use to glorify the evil doings of other people. And like, I just can't believe he didn't give a penny of the proceeds of The Wolf of Wall Street to any of Jordan Belfort's victims. Like, that's shocking to me.
Yeah.
I can't believe you would make a movie like that and then nothing. And he was on record as being like, I really didn't want to center white men in this movie. I really wanted to tell the Osage story. And I'm like, but you didn't. You didn't tell, like, you just told a story about white men. Like, the Osage were there. They had maybe a third of the movie, but they didn't even have an equal half. And so I was, it's what I expected from him, but I was disappointed and bored. It was really long.
Well, I'll say that I think those are very valid critiques, Nicole. I enjoyed the movie more so because being a pretty big historical buff, I was enjoying like the setting and not so much but like appreciating, because I don't want to say I enjoy watching these people like the misery. I thought that the film did a good job of conveying the situation that happened with the Osage to where you go from being like a astute group on like
he did tell it from Ernest's viewpoint, not mine.
Right.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking before the movie, I said, oh, maybe we'll get it from Molly's viewpoint, but then I should have known better because you got Leonardo DiCaprio as Ernest, so it's definitely going to be focused on him. And yeah, I honestly found it was Lily Gladstone. That was Molly's. That's this actress who played Molly, right?
Yes, she was amazing.
Yeah, I thought she had an incredible performance, and like I was more interested in like her scenes, honestly, than I was like in DiCaprio stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I can't fault the performances. Everyone was great.
Yeah. I did think De Niro did a phenomenal job. I mean, De Niro played a guy that was so sweet and loving, and then just within a second, he was plotting to kill everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, he very much gave me like the mastermind villain that I think uh, Sam Jackson's character in Unbreakable was talking about, the two different type of villains you tip have, and De Niro was definitely that one because he's orchestrating all these murders and misery, but he's not personally doing it. He's just making sure it gets affected. I mean, you understand why you had to create like a RICO statute, because that's how you need something like that to nail people like that running enterprises. They aren't directly doing the crimes.
Yeah, he did a good job. He didn't ham it up as the villain at all. Okay, so on the positive side, I definitely, if this gets nominated and or wins for best costumes and best set design, I will not be sorry. I could have just I mean, for the 3.5 hours I had to spend in this movie looking at everybody's clothes and shoes was pretty great. um
Yeah,
so
I thought they did a pretty good job of setting you in 1920s Oklahoma, just like the vehicles, the dress,
these little houses with the lights,
yeah,
like all of it. So that part I really liked. I would say, I think the biggest critique I have of the movie actually is that it felt like every one of the actors was delivering their lines directly to a camera. I felt like there was no connection, and the emotional weight. Like, this is the most triggering thing you can show me on screen, is that this woman repeatedly loses multiple sisters, right? Which is very personal and very emotional for me. I didn't cry. Like, I could not really feel the weight of Lily's experience. And again, I don't fault the actors. I actually fault the director here, because somehow none of them really interacted with each other.
You're talking about the sisters?
All of them, every
Oh,
actor. It felt like they were delivering their lines to a camera and not to another person who was in the room.
yeah, I didn't really think about that. Now that I'm thinking of, as far as I was, huh?
Marietta, did it have like an emotional weight
Oh,
for you?
I think they showed that they were close.
Mm-hmm.
Well, with the murders, yes. Well, from a native's point of view, it's not surprising that it happened.
Right. When you see a movie about your own sort of people's tragic history, like, it hits you more. Did you feel the weight of the history coming through in the movie?
Um, it it does, but we're so desensitized to it because it's been happening for hundreds of years to us.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a surprise that it happened. I mean, like when the one guy that he asked him to murder somebody, and he goes, "Oh no, I can't do that." And then he said, "Well, it's an Indian." Oh, okay, yeah, I can.
Mm-hmm.
That's typical for back in that time, and unfortunately, it's still kind of typical today.
Yeah, that attitude definitely jumped, like with the casual racism that character had, really jumped out to me. And another thing along those lines, I was thinking about those scenes where you would see Molly and other Osage going to, I think it was the banker, whoever was in charge of like the head rights trust that they had set up at the bank, and just the paternalistic behavior from that banker. And then, if I'm not mistaken, I think when they had a scene later in the movie where there was a parade down the street, and you see the Ku Klux Klan out there, I'm pretty sure one of the people in that march of the Klan was the same banker.
Oh, I missed that. Might have been though.
So just little things like that. I think it just shows you how.
Yeah. I think that they put that in there because this stuff happened at the same time as the Tulsa massacres that happened.
Yeah, they did. And that was a nice foreshadowing of that. And that's partly what made me ask if you knew about the incident, because I think these are things that sometimes in your own community, these things are taught and learned and passed down through generations, where kind of the rest of history will have forgotten it. So yeah, I also thought like there was a weird use of subtitles in this movie. Like oftentimes they would be speaking in the native Osage language and they would put subtitle up, and then oftentimes they wouldn't. And I was like, I kind of want to know what they're saying. Like I couldn't figure out like artistically why things were left untranslated. Although I did like.
Well, that's true. I mean, there were a lot of times where they talked Osage and you couldn't understand. They should have had more subtitles. Yeah.
But I did like how much there was use of the language. That was good. That like it was nice to hear it, and it was nice to see people speaking it. So I was happy about that. But then I was like, what are they saying?
A lot of dialogue between Ernest and Molly that was in Osage and no subtitles. That was kind of frustrating.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't believe their love story. They didn't seem like they were in love. I don't know why she married him. Ooh.
She told her sisters he was handsome.
Well, in the book, it really doesn't portray Ernest as loving her that much. I mean, he plotted to kill her.
Yeah, and all her family. I really like. There was a scene in the movie where he's confessed the first time and then tries to take it back, and then she comes to pick him up. And I'm like, the only way this scene makes sense to me is if she poisons his dinner tonight when he gets home. Like you just found out he had a hand in killing all your sisters. Like, I don't know, how do you take this man back into your house? That part was just baffling to me.
Yeah, so I thought that the movie was at least attempting to portray that, oh, she's just so in love with him. But I'm like, okay, I guess they're trying to show it, but not, but yeah, I see what you're saying as far as the believability. But for me, I said, well, the only way I could rationalize some of her behavior, I said, oh, she must really love this man to be doing all this, especially given what he was doing.
Yeah. He's not good looking enough to sell me on that story otherwise.
Even in the book, Molly portrayed that she loved him.
Okay.
Yeah, so I haven't read the book, so how faithful of an adaptation would you say it was, Marietta?
Oh, it wasn't really close. There was a half of the book was on the FBI, and they left pretty much all of that out.
Yeah.
Which was fine with me because I thought that part of the book was kind of boring anyway.
Fair enough.
They pushed it a little bit as far as the love story. They didn't show a love story in the book necessarily.
Yeah, so according to Martin Scorsese, when he first sat down to like make a script and think about the movie based on the book, he was like, well, if I tell the book story, then it's really just going to be all about white men. But if I sort of center the marriage, then you have like Lily as a character in her own right. And I was like, it was still really about white men, but I guess you tried. I don't know. So I don't know.
I think it was Leonardo that wanted to push it more towards the story of Molly and the Osage.
Mm-hmm.
So at least they did more on the Osage than they did anything else.
Yeah.
They could have done more.
I loved the ending, 2 parts. I loved the fake radio play as a way to sum up what happened to all the characters. I thought that was really innovative and fun. And I loved that the movie ends on the Osage celebration. Whatever ceremony, they were all dancing and they were joyous. And I thought that was a really great way to end that. And such a tragic story to show the joy in the community.
Yeah, I thought that radio bit was pretty creative myself. And at first I was thinking, okay, did Scorsese just said, all right, I'm tired, I want to wrap this up and just
I thought Martin Scorsese coming out and reading Molly's obituary was cool.
Yeah. And the tears in his eyes was like the most emotion I felt this entire movie. It was moving. It really was.
But his reading of Molly's obituary was kind of cool. The thing that I caught in the film, and I really actually researched it, was they had a scene where Hale had given money for a dance studio. Mm-hmm. And I looked that up to see if it was true. I couldn't find it, But I think they brought that in there because of Maria Tallchief, who is the first Native American prima ballerina.
Ballerina. Oh, when was she? No, yes. I don't know this.
But she was quite the prima ballerina.
Was she Osage?
And she was Osage.
Oh, okay.
Yes, she was Osage.
Wow, she's gorgeous. I'm looking at pictures on the internet.
My niece was Miss South Dakota, and she did ballet, and she idolized Maria Tallchief.
No, that's really cool. Thank you for sharing that. It's a little history nugget for us and our listeners. I'd never heard of her. Yeah, so on some of the other technical elements, there was a lot of praise for the cinematography. I found it fine. I wasn't sort of blown away by it. I thought some of the shots of the old photographs looked really good. The fake old photographs I thought looked great. I thought some of the like grainy 1920s, 30s feel of it really worked in some places, but maybe not in others.
Yeah, I thought the way the film was shot was it felt I'm trying to think of the right word here, but I felt sort of like, yeah, okay, I am here in the 1920s watching this. Like it didn't feel super manufactured, if that makes sense. Like where some historical piece films you're watching, you're like, oh, this just seems kind of like it's on a Hollywood studio lot, and like this definitely didn't have like that vibe.
Yeah, no, it didn't. I'll agree with you there.
Yeah, yeah. When I actually was in Pawhuska, and some of those buildings are still there. I mean, it's a pretty old town, but I think a lot of that film was done in Fairfax.
Yeah, I mean it was a little bit like desaturated intentionally, which I don't love. I'm finding kind of tired of the use of that. But yeah, I mean it was serviceable. Like I people were like, oh, the cinematography, but I was like, I wasn't blown away by it. It was fine, but it wasn't special to me. And yeah, for me, like on the technical side.
Yeah. And that area of the country can be extremely beautiful. I mean, around Tulsa area, the trees, I mean, it's gorgeous. And I was kind of upset that they didn't show a lot of that. And there's one thing in the book, it's this big old tree, and that's where Sinclair, Phillips, and all of them would gather under this tree to bid for their leases. I was wishing that they had that in there.
What does that mean, bid for their leases?
They would kind of like bidding at an auction.
Okay.
They would have tracts of land, and they would bid for them to put a lease on there to pull the oil out.
Gotcha. So with the oil developers or the oil refiners.
Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Then that was done with like the allotments, right? That because I was a little confused. It seemed like if it was like held in like a trust for the entire tribe, or in like and everyone was getting like a per capita payout, or people were getting payouts based on what was being drawn off like the land that they personally owned.
No, it was the tribe owned the oil rights underneath all that land. Okay. And that is where the head rights come from, because the land would generate oil, and they would divvy that out to the people through the head rights, and they're still head rights. I've been getting a couple of FOIA requests concerning it.
I bet you get a lot more in your last 2 months after this. So then the tribe determines who has head rights and what amount.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's funny because only natives can inherit, yet that's why they would marry them and have kids with them, because they couldn't inherit the head rights, but their kids could, and that's how they would get the money.
Right.
Yeah, and it seemed like Hale's character was a little perturbed that Ernest and Molly had a third child. I don't know if it had something to do with how as far as inheritance goes, like it kind of dividing up the estate more than he wanted, or what like they weren't clear with that.
Yeah,
But that's what my suspicion was.
Well, and I wondered too, because it comes up when they're talking amongst themselves. I don't know if you know, Marietta, it seemed like a difference between if you were, say, full-blooded Osage or if you were, for lack of a better term, mixed blood, partially. That just doesn't sound like coming out of my mouth. I don't know what.
If you were that's why they called them incompetent, because they were full blood. Had nothing to do with their intelligence or anything. It was just based on the fact that they were full blood.
Okay. Yeah, so that was something that was in the movie, which I think possibly Martin Scorsese being a dude might have explained. Like, I get not wanting to have too much exposition, but Molly goes in every whatever time to ask for money and she has to say that she's incompetent. And from my perspective, I didn't know if she was incompetent because she was Native or she was incompetent because she was a Native woman. And I needed that explained, you know?
Yeah. She was incompetent because she was a full, it was purely because she was a full blood. And that happened across the country. If you were full blood, didn't matter how intelligent you were or if you could read and write, they would deem you incompetent.
Right. Yeah. So thanks for explaining that. I did look it up afterwards, but I was like, when you're a woman, you kind of wonder which way or both if it's playing out. Yeah, I mean, Native Alaskans are still getting kind of oil money, right, out of their trust.
Yeah, I think that's the case up there. And I think even some Alaskan citizens get paid, but that's separate. That's
Alaska's
separate.
A little different. Alaska has Alaska, that oil money, they're not really bands or tribes out there. They're corporations. And they get their oil money through the corporation.
Okay. But it's set up by the tribe or not even that? The corporation?
It's set up by the tribes.
Okay. Yeah, unfortunately, when you come from the part of the country that I come from, where we were very good at making sure that we removed all of the Native Americans from our land, unfortunately, like I haven't had a lot of personal experience with this stuff. So all of it is by learning, which is why I was so excited to have you come on, Marietta. So if I say something stupid, please just know it's out of ignorance. I just don't have I didn't grow up learning this stuff.
That's fine. If I go out to the East Coast or the West Coast, big cities, everybody thinks of Dances with Wolves.
Right.
Yeah. But if you go to smaller towns that are surrounded by reservations, then you get that prejudice.
Yeah. And I still, unfortunately, I have not been on reservation land yet. My last time I was supposed to do that was in 2020, was it 2021? It was in New Mexico, and I had all these plans to visit all these pueblos, and unfortunately there was a coronavirus outbreak, so I was not able to visit.
If you want to get culture in New Mexico, the best time to go is Gathering of Nations.
Yeah? When is that?
It's in the spring, but it's one of the biggest powwows in the country.
Cool.
And it's quite a sight.
I bet.
Yeah, it's quite a sight when they do their grand entry, which is all the dancers coming in at one time. It's unbelievable.
So you brought up Dances with Wolves, which I feel like is like the last sort of tent pole. This is what everybody in America thinks about Native Americans. I don't think this movie is going to have the viewership that it didn't even beat Taylor Swift on its opening weekend. But
yeah.
She's a juggernaut on her own.
She is, but it was like not her opening weekend either. So I guess, Marietta, I'm curious, and Justin, feel free to weigh in as well. Like, I mean, I think Dances with Wolves was kind of progressive for its time. Do we think of Killers of the Flower Moon as progressive for its time? Do we think that, how do we feel?
I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, this movie just shows the evilness of men in general.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think that's a great descriptor.
Yeah. Yeah. Dances with Wolves showed the beauty of Native Americans back in that time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because I noticed, I'm forgetting the name of the character, but the one who they said he was suffering from melancholy, but I guess today we would say depression. You know, how he was clearly having issues with like alcoholism and like, you know, suicidal thoughts. Yep. And I felt like it showed, I think that character was to show like also like these are like real problems that people are still experiencing, even with this influx of like oil money. Like it's still, that's not changing how like somebody like feels about like where they are in society.
Yeah,
exactly.
I think so. I firmly don't believe this movie was progressive. If it were actually progressive, it would have centered fully the Osage, and the white people would have been ancillary characters to that story.
Yes.
Like, it's 2023. We don't need to make movies about white people. I got in a very big argument about this after the movie. So there are other people who think differently that no, we still need to center white people to get white audiences. I don't agree. But I do think that this story, I think it does have a lot in common with the burning of Tulsa, in the sense of that
white racism.
But no, they're about racism, but they're also like white Americans are very content in believing that Black people were always poor. You know, they were slaves and then they were sharecroppers, right?
Yeah.
And that Native Americans lost their land and then they were like poor and they were alcoholics, right? And so both of these stories,
alcoholics. That's a big
misnomer. Unfortunately, it's a big conception that I speak for all of white America. It's a big stereotype, unfortunately. And so I think that this shows the Osage having gained wealth and status and a time so that it showed another version of American history that went against that stereotype. And I thought that part was I think that part is important and an overall benefit.
And I'd say a through line, since you're using a reference Tulsa, and this is set in Oklahoma as well, is that you've got these two minority communities where people are being, you know, viewed, how most people view them as being successful. Oh, this is an American dream. But then you have like white Americans seeing this and just saying, no, I don't like how it's up. Like I want to do something to like basically like ruin it. It's like, you know, you get Hale murdering people over here trying to get some of their wealth, and then whereas in Tulsa you just have people destroying the successful Black community.
Yeah.
They don't want their conscience touched on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a really good way of framing it, Marietta.
I mean,
because
if you look at what's going on today, it's still going on. Look at all the publicity that was in Gabby Petito.
Mm-hmm.
The decade before she was missing, there were 710 missing indigenous people, over 400 of them women.
Yeah.
Not one of them had the publicity that she got.
Right. And so that's the other thing too, in terms of where this movie lands in history. If either of you saw it, it was immediately canceled. There was a TV show, I think it was on CBS, called Alaska Daily. Starred Hilary Swank. She's like this hotshot reporter who gets canceled and finds herself in Alaska and is assigned to the story of one missing Native Alaskan woman, and then gets into all of the other missing Native Alaskan women and what a huge issue this is in the community. And the show had a lot of Native American characters, and it was very centered on their story, despite, having the Hilary Swank lead. And it was all an exploration about this phenomenon, and then, it was canceled.
I do remember the show. I had literally forgotten about this show, Nicole, until you brought me.
I do remember this show, and I have always meant to watch that.
It was really good, and it was a way.
I mean, it's just surprising. Yep. And to start the conversation, you need to start the conversation.
You do, but you got to stop centering white people in this story. And then then you had the TV show Rutherford Falls.
Yeah,
which got called out for centering a white man's story too much. They course corrected in the second season. They made, partly because the actor was just so brilliant. Like, they made one of the more minor characters had a much bigger role, who was Native American, in the second season. And, I think where America stands is still like very far behind where Canada stands with what they refer to as First Nations. All their First Nations content and media. They have a lot of TV shows.
On the topic of missing and murdered, I'm going to put this out there only to get her name out there.
Sure.
My great niece had a best friend who on August 8th of this year was found. She was missing for 6 days. She was found dead in a ditch. And law enforcement will not give the family any information. They're not doing anything. It's because she's a Native American, and she was a mother and had two sons, and they're being very hush hush about everything.
What's her name?
Kyla Red Bear.
So and also, like, speaking back to like the Canada thing, like, I think, was it last year Justin Trudeau officially apologized for the residential school system, which we also had here in America, and I didn't hear Biden say boo about.
Well, I can't say from where there's definitely, I know there was some FOIA requests about that, where there's been work at least done in our agency with regards to that, and like working with people who attended those schools, like getting their stories and like allowing them to, like, speak on that. So
that's good. I'm glad to hear it.
I stopped counting when they found over 10,000 graves. But for my reservation, we brought home, I think it was 2 years ago, we brought home, I think it was either 6 or 8 remains of members of the Rosebud Sioux tribe.
Oh, wonderful.
And it was really touching because they were real small bundles. So you knew they were children. And it was quite the ceremony.
Yeah. Well, there's also, what was I don't remember what I saw this on, but it was something in media that brought my attention to, like, the Smithsonian's holding on to a whole bunch of remains for no good reason. And tribes are working really hard to, repatriate's probably not the right word here. Bring their ancestors back home.
Actually, that's exactly the right word, is repatriate.
Okay. Yeah. So, I mean, I don't think a Leonardo DiCaprio movie, like, really stacks up.
No, hopefully it'll inspire some people to watch it, to like do some more digging. Like, I know I've looked more into, like, just with the Osage murders, and some people just get more, I think, awareness about these stories that haven't really been told.
Yeah, I think it's making it small trickles into more mainstream culture, but I think there's just still a lack of support for letting people tell their own stories.
I agree. And, our stories have been out there for so many years, hundreds of years, but they're not really taken serious because we're Native.
Mm-hmm.
And it's simple. It goes back to the only good Indian is a dead Indian. I mean,
Or the one I can dress up as is for Halloween, right? Like, or I can just put feathers in my hair,
Yeah.
and have a dream catcher, and isn't that cool? And
Yep.
have no connection to like what any of that is really about.
Yeah. Well, I was watching
Yeah,
literally on
exactly.
Sunday the Chiefs Chargers game, and they're showing like these fans doing that tomahawk chant, and I'm just like, I'm like, this is just like it's kind of it's pretty gross, to be honest.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
and
Yeah. Yeah.
living in DC, obviously, I have had this conversation about team names, and there's always a moment in a conversation where I am in fact a white person and another white person is saying like they did a public opinion survey among Native Americans who found the team name fine, and I'm like, that's not how morality works. Like, I can't. What am I don't like. That's.
I'll tell you one thing about the Redskins. I will tell you a story about the Redskins. The reason why that is so offensive is because back in it was in Algonquin, early times on the East Coast, but they would take body parts of Native Americans and place them in the shop windows and with signs that said Redskins for sale. And that is why it is as offensive as it is.
I didn't realize that.
I mean, literally, women's breasts.
Oh
yeah. That's where the term Redskins came. They have in South Dakota, North Dakota, they have begun getting, even in Wyoming, getting rid of a lot of the names, the squaw name. And I can't remember what language it's from, but calling a Native woman a squaw is like calling her the C word.
Yeah. Oh, so you did get a little shout out. BIA got a shout out in the movie. Having had such a long career there, Marietta, do you feel things have changed in your 35 years working for was it administration?
With BIA?
Yeah.
Well, I can say anything I want because I'm retiring in 2 months.
If you change your mind, just tell me.
No, it's changed somewhat, but not enough.
Okay.
I can say that.
Okay.
We get an awful lot of money that they could be putting towards more resources for the murdered, and they finally, and it's only been within, I think, maybe 3-4 years that they established the murdered and missing indigenous women department. And they need to fund a little more towards that because there are so many that are missing. I mean, in 2020 alone, there were over 5,000 missing indigenous people.
It's shocking. And Justin knows this about me. My sister went missing. So I know how unique a pain that is to have that unanswered question follow you around. It's very different than, it's still sad, to lose someone, but to have the confirmation of them being dead and knowing that that's true is a different journey than if they're just disappeared and you have no idea what happened. It's a peculiar kind of tragedy.
Yep. Yeah. It's something that doesn't go away until you find out what happened.
Yeah. One of the criticisms that I had of the movie was that there was a real lack of diversity in the cast, as it just painted everything as sort of a white Native American issue. And I was like, there were no Black people in this town.
And
that doesn't seem realistic.
And Justin, my granddaughter is half African American and half white and Native. And she joined the Native American Club, and the person who ran the club knew me, so he knew she was Native American. But all of the kids in there were saying, "Why are you in here?" You're Black, you're not Native American.
Nope.
Yeah.
It's almost like the irony of like different minority groups discriminating against other minorities.
As long as they don't say their grandmother was a Cherokee princess.
Here.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, that's because I'll be honest, before I started working at BIA, I didn't even know about the Dawes role, and like, and this is just being explained to me. I said, "Oh, so the government did a census of tribes at this time, and they're saying,
oh my Lord,
yeah." And
explain it. I don't know this. Tell me more.
Did you know that after the because of the Dawes Act, within 25 years of the Dawes Act, the Native Americans lost over 90 million acres of their land.
I didn't realize that.
So was it
90 million acres?
Or quote unquote blood test?
It was an allotment act. So it was an allotment act, and they said, okay, we're going to give you 360 acres here and here. But then all of the land that they didn't allot, they sold to settlers.
Yeah.
And so the Dawes role
was across the entire United States.
Yeah, and your earlier question, Nicole, at least the understanding I have of it, and Marietta, feel free to correct me if I'm wrong on this, is that it was act. I believe it was in either the 20s or 30s when they did the census. It was the U.S. federal government doing the census of members of tribes. So. Yeah. And now I think with and each tribe gets to determine like their membership process or require like what you need to so that you can be a recognized member of their tribe. But I think with a lot of them, if you can point to a direct ancestor who was like on like that role, like from one of those censuses that the government did back then.
Oh, okay. So it became like a historical record.
Yeah.
It's kind of crazy because blood-wise, my great-grandfather was from Sicangu, which is Rosebud. Mm-hmm. But he had closer ties with the Oglalas at Pine Ridge. So when they put them on reservations, he said, no, I'm going to be on Pine Ridge. Even though he had no blood connection to Pine Ridge. So he's enrolled at Pine Ridge, and my mother's enrolled in Rosebud. And I chose Rosebud because I knew Shortbow was originally from Rosebud.
Fair enough. Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the problem with doing these types of things, right? Like, there are all the people who were quote unquote passing, right? There are all the people who got mixed around for different reasons. Like, yeah, that's ugly. It's not a good way to do it.
Yeah. Well, and the biggest problem with the Dawes Act was they didn't think about how to probate out that land. So they gave it to heirs. Well, then the next heirs, the next person who got a portion of that went to the next heirs. And that's why the land got so fractionated that it literally is worth nothing. And thank God they have the land buyback to where they're selling the land. And at least it goes back to the tribe.
Yeah.
At least the tribe can do something with it.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because I think that's another thing that's really hard to understand as an American, and I certainly don't know all the ins and outs of it, of to the extent to which tribes are sovereign nations in themselves, and like, you know, the whole like, well, we had to get the Federal Bureau of Investigation involved because you're on federal land, but you're not really on state land, and like, I think that's something that like, you know, the casual American doesn't necessarily really understand, other than like maybe there are cheap cigarettes on the you know what I mean? Like, I think the complexities of how what
exactly
citizenship for a Native American in America is really something that's very poorly understood. I know I don't understand it, so maybe I'm just speaking.
To make it more complex, the tribes are sovereign nations where they can govern their people themselves, but the land which they're on is held in the name of the United States in trust for the tribe.
It's a weird word there, trust.
And more so in the probate sense than you would think.
But still, like, it's a funny word to put between the United States and the Native American population.
Yeah. Because
the thing about it is, if I own a piece of property in trust, I can't do anything with that without the signature approval of the Secretary of Interior.
Right.
And neither can the tribes.
Right. They're still basically incompetent at the end of the day, right?
Basically. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like
I worked in realty for years.
What we do on the podcast to sort of wrap things up is we kind of give the movie a rating. So between 1 to 10, where 1, you think the movie was terrible, it like set back Native American rights for 50 years, like a really terrible score. And like a 10 would be best movie ever, should win all the Oscars, and like really advanced the cause, very progressive, which I think we've kind of already agreed no one's going to give it a 10. So I'll let Justin go first.
All right. So for me, I'd say I'd give this one a 6.
Yeah.
I don't think it wasn't a huge game changer. I do think there were some incredible performances here. I did enjoy the movie, but as far as like a cultural impact, I don't necessarily think it's going to have even say the same impact as we alluded to earlier that Dances with Wolves had.
Kevin Costner is an unstoppable force. Marietta, what would you give it?
Probably give it a 7, only for the acting. I thought the acting with De Niro and Molly was phenomenal, and I feel both of those should get their nomination for an actor. The movie overall, I was disappointed because it was not true to the actual book, and I was looking for that. But all in all, I didn't mind the 3.5 hours. I mean, it was slow at first, but once it got going, and I did enjoy Martin Scorsese's obituary of Molly at the end.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to give it a 5, even though it was really long and boring. You can watch it on an Apple TV and pause and go get a drink. So it'll be easier for you. Because the costumes and the sets, like, totally amazing. And despite, I think, one, it is really important that we know of this historical event. I think it's something that's really important to keep in the consciousness of modern Americans. And I think, fairly or not fairly, we're at least not in the days of the spaghetti westerns where all the Indians were played by Italians. Like, you actually had a fully like Native American cast for the people who were given those.
Yeah.
You got to hear the Osage language. You got to see some of their ceremonies, some of their dances. Like, so I can't just trash the movie. Like, I didn't care for it, but like, there were a lot of really good elements that make it worthwhile. All right, so go ahead.
Unfortunately, there are a lot more stories like this out there amongst Native American.
Yeah. Well, and yeah, any chance we can get to highlight the disappearance of Indigenous women here in Canada, in Alaska, anywhere, I think is a really important thing to keep everybody focused on. But so we want to give recommendations. Tell us something that you're digging this week. Marietta, you have something for us?
My recommendation is Reservation Dogs on Hulu.
Yes. Excellent.
So the recommendation I have, well, 2 actually. One is thematically sort of related to this. It's Prey. It's on Hulu. It's in the Predator series, but it's set in the early 1700s, and it focuses on a Comanche woman who is a young woman, in the Comanche tribe, who's fighting one of the predator monsters. So you get it from the perspective of Comanche people. And there's even an option to watch the film on Hulu with Comanche dialogue. And the other recommendation I have is because since we're getting close to Halloween, and I happened to watch this the other day for again, The Nightmare Before Christmas, one of my favorite animated films, and I think it's just, it's fitting since we're in that time of year.
Great. I'm going to recommend, if you're in the DC area or you're visiting us, you have until the end of March. At the Renwick Gallery, which is the craft gallery, they have an exhibit right now called Sharing Honors and Burn-ins. It features a whole collection of Native American artists. I don't want to spoil anything that's in this exhibit. It's stunning. It's really amazing and totally worth seeing. So, and everything in Smithsonian is free. So if you have a free weekend in DC, like, jump on into the Renwick. You will not be sorry.
And I have to give one more recommendation. Dark Winds is a great show too.
Tell us
Native
more.
American show.
Dark Winds. I haven't heard of this one.
It's Dark Winds. It's about a Navajo police officer and a fledgling FBI guy, and all the murders that they're trying to solve.
Ooh, it's got a great cast.
Very good show.
Recognize some of the people. Cool. Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Thank you, Marietta, for coming on. This was amazing. If you have a question or a comment or anything you'd like to tell us, we're at moviesmatterpod@gmail.com. Our website is moviesthatmatterpodcast.com. We're on YouTube. We're on everywhere you get a podcast. You can find us really easily. We're on Facebook. So thank you for listening to this episode. And remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll see you next time.